Welcome to the fourth DraftSight tutorial. Now that we've learned how to draw entities using the Draw toolbar and the aids and guides in the status bar, we can move on to the Modify toolbar. The Modify toolbar is made up of many tools that manipulate entities. In this tutorial, we'll be going over the following tools, though not necessarily in this order: Delete, Copy, Mirror, Move, Offset, Rotate, Scale, Stretch, Chamfer, Fillet, Trim, and Explode. The first item we're going to look at is the Delete button. First, let me draw a few entities. The Delete button is very straightforward. Either you can select entities you wish to delete and then hit the Delete button to remove them, or you can first click the Delete button and then select the entities you wish to delete by either clicking on them or clicking once, dragging, and clicking again, then hitting Enter. The next tool we'll look at is the Copy tool. The Copy tool will copy an entity or entities that you specify. Just as with the Delete command, you can either select the entities first, then click the Copy command, or you can execute the command first and select the entities later. Let me demonstrate. First, I'll draw a line that we can copy. Next, I'll click the Copy command. Now I'm prompted to specify the entities I wish to copy. I can either click on it or click here, drag, and click again to select it. Now that I've selected the entities, I need to hit Enter. Now I'm asked to specify the from point. Let me do so. I'll click here, just in a random area. Now I can move this entity in relationship to the from point, and as I click, a copy is created. And I can create as many copies as I need. When I'm done, I just hit Enter to exit out of that command. In that example, I used a random point as the from point. However, snapping to an end or midpoint may be more useful. Let me demonstrate. First, I'll clean up. Then I'm going to create a 5 by 3 box. So let me start my box here. I'm going to type in ampersand 5, 3 and hit Enter. Now I've created my box. Next, I'm going to create a circle. Let me grab the circle tool in the center of this box. So I'm going to wake up this tracking point here. I have eSnap and eTrack on, so I can do that. I'm going to activate this one. And now I'm going to draw the circle here in the center. I now need to specify my radius. I'm going to use 0.25 and hit Enter. Now I'll use the Copy command to create another circle 1.5 units to the right of the center of this one. So I'll click the Copy tool. Now I'll click on the circle. Now that I've specified my entities, I'll hit Enter. Now I need to specify the from point. I will use an eSnap to select the center point of the circle. And now I need to specify my second point. For that, because I have an exact dimension I'd like to use, I will use relative polar coordinates. So I'll use at 1.5 on a 0-degree angle and hit Enter. And now my circle is copied 1.5 units directly to the right of my original. Now I'll make a copy to the left, 1.5 units, but also slightly below my original circle. To do that, I'm going to use relative Cartesian coordinates. So I will go to the left, which would be negative 1.5, and I would like to go below 0.25, which is also the same size as my radius. That way the midpoint of my circle will line up with the bottom point of this circle. So I need to go down 0.25, so it would be negative 0.25, and I'm going to hit Enter. And now my circle was copied here to the left. Now I'm going to hit Enter to exit out of the circle command. Next, we will take a look at the Move tool. You can use the Move tool to move an entity from one point to another. First, select the entities you wish to move. Then execute the Move command by either clicking on the Move icon in the Modify toolbar or by typing M into the command window. Moving objects is similar to copying them. Just as with the Copy command, we need to select a from point and an end point. We can specify the end point by either entering in coordinates or by using the mouse. In this example, I'm going to move the middle circle so that it lines up vertically with the left circle instead of the right circle. So first, I'm going to select my from point, which I will use the lower quadrant point of the circle. Next, I'm going to activate the tracking point on the left circle at the lower quadrant. And then since polar is activated, I can use polar snapping to make sure that I move straight down. And an intersection snap has been activated, so I can click and my circle has been moved straight down to line up with the left circle. Next, we'll take a look at the Mir Tool. The Mir Tool creates a mirror image of an entity, or you could say that the Mir Tool can flip an entity over. This will be useful if you want to draw a slab face up and then flip it over, or mirror it, in the same way you will be flipping your slab over to cut it on the CNC machine. To execute the Mir command, first select the entities you wish to mirror, then click on the Mir Tool. I'm going to zoom out so that what I mirror will fit on the screen. Next, we're asked to specify the start point of our mirror line. The mirror line is the line on which the entity will be flipped. You can either enter coordinates into the command window, or you can use the mouse to define a start point. For the most part, it won't matter where you place the mirror line. So I'm going to select here, this is an arbitrary place, is the start point of my mirror line. Now the next step is important. You need to specify the end point of the mirror line. As I move the mouse, you can see how, if the mirror line is not perfectly straight up and down, the entity will rotate as well as mirror. To ensure that the line will not cause the entity to rotate, we can either type in relative polar coordinates, such as at 5, 90, to make sure that it's on a 90-degree angle, or we could turn on polar or ortho to help guide our line. The 5 that I created is just an arbitrary length. The length only needs to be long enough to make sure that it is distinct from the start point. DraftSight will extrapolate the line as needed. Now that I have entered the length, I'll hit enter. Now I will be asked if I would like to delete my source entity. I will be typing in yes, since I don't need it. As you can see, the Mir Tool has flipped our entity over and created a mirror image of our original entity. The next tool we'll learn about is the Offset tool. Let me illustrate quickly what the Offset tool does, just so you have an idea of what I'm talking about as I go into detail as to how it works. So I'll click on the Offset tool. I'm going to specify my distance, select my source entity, and the side for my destination. The copy that was created is called an offset. As you can see, the Offset tool creates a parallel copy of an entity. According to DraftSight's help file, when offsetting lines, their size does not change. However, with rectangles, circles, arcs, and ellipses, the Offset tool uses the center of the entity as the basis for creating the offsets. In other words, circles are offset either closer to or further from their center points. This changes the radius and thus the size of the circle. Rectangles will also be offset in relation to their center, and their size will also change, as you can see here. So, let's create an offset of a line. I will select the line tool, and I'll draw a line here below this rectangle. Now I will select the line that I want to create an offset of, and then I will click on the Offset tool. Next, I'm asked to specify the distance of the offset. I will type in 0.5 and hit enter. And now I need to specify the side for destination. I would like the offset to be on the top side, so I'll click above the line. And as you can see, a new entity was created, exactly the same as the first, 0.5 units above it. With this example, we use the keyboard to enter in an exact distance for the offset to be created. Let me illustrate what happens if we were to use a mouse. So I'll repeat the process. I will select the entity I wish to offset. Next, I will select the Offset tool. Then I'm asked to specify the distance. I'll click here in the center of the entity I'm trying to offset. And next, I will specify the distance using the mouse. Let's say for this example that I would like the offset to pass through the center of this circle. If I were to use a mouse and specify this distance and click in the center of the circle, it wouldn't work. This is because DraftSight uses the length of the line that I'm stretching to create a line that is perpendicular to the entity that I am offsetting. So to demonstrate, I'll click here and specify this is my distance, and now I'll select the side for my destination, this side. As you can see, the line did not go through the center of the circle. The line was straightened and ran perpendicular to the center point, which I had selected first. Using this method of creating an offset is good when you know the exact distance and can type it in with the keyboard, but it is not very helpful when you're using a mouse. So let's look at a second way to set the distance of an offset. I will execute the Offset command again after selecting my entity. And now I'm going to choose the through point option with a T. Next, I'm asked to specify the through point. When specifying the through point, DraftSight will only take into account the movement that is perpendicular to the entity. In this case, DraftSight will measure my movement on the y-axis. So I'll go ahead and click here in the center again, And as you can see, it created a copy directly above the entity at the height that I had indicated. Now, let's clean up our area and do the same thing with a rectangle and a square. So I will select the rectangle. Next, I'll select the offset tool. I'll specify my distance of 0.5 units and hit enter. I'll specify the outer side of my rectangle, and an offset was drawn. And I will now do the same thing with a circle. I'll select the circle, click on the offset tool, specify my distance, 0.25, and then I'll specify the side for my destination. I'll specify this side. As you can see, an offset was drawn. Now I will clean up our drawing area and we can move on to the next tool, the scale tool. According to DraftSight's help file, the scale tool is used to change the size of entities while keeping the proportions the same. First, select the entities you wish to scale. I'll select these. Then type in scale or select the scale button from the toolbar. Next, we need to specify the base point. The base point will remain in the same position when the entity is scaled. All other points will either expand outwards or contract towards it. So I'll select the base point, just an arbitrary location. I'll select the bottom left-hand corner. Next, we are prompted to enter the scale factor. I will enter 25.4. 25.4 is a conversion factor when changing from inches to millimeters. Now the entities are 25.4 times larger. My drawing is now so large that it no longer fits in my window, so I will click on the Zoom to Fit button on the top right. This will adjust the zoom so that all entities fit into my window. You will be using the scale command often, as the CAM program uses millimeters. After creating your drawing using inches, you will convert it to millimeters by scaling it by a factor of 25.4. Now let's take a look at the explode command. According to DraftSight's help file, the explode command breaks up complex objects into their component entities. So far, the only object that we have worked on that can be exploded is the rectangle. The rectangle is made up of 4 components, however, they're treated as if they were one entity. For example, if I select one side of a rectangle, the entire rectangle becomes selected. To be able to modify specific components, we need to break up or explode the rectangle into separate entities. To use the explode command, first select the entities you wish to explode, and then click the explode button or enter explode into the command window. Now, as you can see, the rectangle has been broken up into individual entities that can be modified separately. For example, I can move just one side of this rectangle. I'll select this entity to move, and now I can move it. Whereas before, I would have moved the whole rectangle. But now that it has been exploded, I can move individual parts of it. Before we move on to the rotate command, I will enter the undo command, and then I'll hit enter again to undo one command. And now we have a full rectangle that I can rotate. So to use the rotate tool, first select an entity, the one you wish to rotate, then select the rotate tool. Then you need to specify the pivot point. If you wish for the entity to stay more or less in place as you rotate it, you want to select the center as your pivot point. Otherwise, you can choose a point near your entity. Now we're being prompted to specify the rotation angle. We can do that with the mouse, however it's difficult to be accurate unless you have ortho or polar activated. You can also specify your rotation angle manually by typing in a number. I'll specify 90 degrees, and my entity has been rotated 90 degrees. Now we'll delete it, and we can move on to the stretch command. The stretch command can be used to change the length of a rectangle. First, select the sides of the rectangle which you wish to stretch. I'll select these 3 sides. Next, click the stretch tool. Then specify the from point. I'll specify the midpoint. Then you can stretch it to its desired location. You will probably want to have ortho or polar activated, otherwise you may not stretch it on a 90-degree angle. Once you've stretched it to the desired location, simply click, and you will have stretched your rectangle. I'll type undo, and we can go on to the next modify tool. The chamfer command is used to make beveled corners. You can create chamfers on corners of rectangles, and also the corners of 2 lines that intersect or come close to intersecting. To create a chamfer, first select the chamfer tool, or type in CHA, the chamfer alias, into the command window and hit enter. Next, we need to select the D for distance option by entering D into the command window. Now we're prompted to specify the first distance. The distance being referred to is the distance from where the lines intersect to where the chamfer will begin. We can specify unique chamfers for our first and second line. For this tutorial, I'll specify 5 for the first line and 10 for the second line. Now I'm being prompted to specify the first line, which will have a distance of 5, and the second line, which have a distance of 10. And as you can see, a chamfer was created. And now I'll undo that chamfer and redo it using chamfers of equal lengths. So I'll run the chamfer command, then I'll enter D again to specify the distance. I'll create a new distance of 7 and 7 again. Now specify the first line and the second line. And a chamfer was created. Now I'll enter undo into the command window, and we can move on to the Fillet Tool. The Fillet Tool, similar to the Chamfer tool, is a tool that modifies corners. While the Chamfer tool made beveled corners, the Fillet Tool makes rounded corners. To use the Fillet Tool, first click on it. Next, we need to enter in the radius, so we're going to select the radius option by entering R and hitting enter. I will specify my radius as 7.5, then enter. Now I need to specify the first entity, the first line that I'd like to use, which will be this one, and then the second entity, this one. And as you can see, this corner was rounded on a 7.5 unit radius. Just like the chamfer tool, the fillet tool can be used on the corners of boxes, but also on lines that intersect or come close to intersecting. The last tool we will be examining is the trim tool. The trim tool allows us to delete a portion of an entity. First, I'll draw a few lines that we can trim. Now I will execute the trim command by clicking on the trim icon in the modified toolbar. The first thing that the trim command asks is to specify the cutting edges. I will use this box as my cutting edge, so I'll select that. Now that I've selected the cutting edges, I will enter. Now I'm asked to specify the segments to remove. I can specify them by either clicking on them one by one, or by clicking, opening my selection window, and clicking again. To dig deeper into what the Modify toolbar can do, go to Help, select the Search tab, and search for Modifying Entities. The third result will be an article of the same name. Click on it, and here you can find out more information about the tools mentioned in this tutorial. This will end the Modify toolbar tutorial.